to see how that goes. But
all right, so we are recording, and I'll try to send a recording of the meeting to everybody so that you all can have access to it and use it for ways that help what you're trying to give voice to. All right.
Sounds good.
So for those who are in, we have a few viewers already, and at least one comment. Thank you, Stephen, in New Hampshire.
Okay.
And we've got just less than a minute. So Diane, I was thinking about you as I was jotting down a couple of notes to myself, you know, some of the items we talked about. And boy, it's really, I had the opportunity to sit in on Liberated Learners webinar, and it was interesting.
Oh, when did you do that?
It was, was it Friday?
Oh, excellent.
Or no, what's today? Today's Wednesday. It was, I think Monday. It was Monday.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, so that was excellent, and spent some time on the website and found, you know, I love the tagline.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
learning is natural, schooling is optional.
Absolutely.
And it's so interesting, and this is where Frank and I met a couple years ago when we got started, and people were very insulted by that phrase. That's Ken Danford's line. But it's sort of, now I think we're getting to some new ground where we can start to think more productively about how kids learn. So I don't think it's as offensive as it used to be, but people were offended in the beginning.
Well, it is 7 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and get started. And just want to give everybody who is, all of our viewers, I want to give you a great big welcome to the Education Options Education Ecosystem Public Forum. And as I was saying a moment ago, I credit that line, Education Ecosystem, to Frank Edelblut, the Commissioner of Education of the state of New Hampshire. He's the first person I ever heard use that, and I'm going to love to hear him talk about that in a little bit. But I think you're in for a real treat tonight. I'm very blessed to have been able to assemble a fantastic panel of speakers. So I think it's fair to say that this panel represents a really wide range of experience in the world of education. And guys, I did a little bit of math, and represented here is well over a century's worth of education experience. And so I don't know what that says to us about our age, but but certainly, you know, there's a wealth of knowledge and information in this panel. I'm really excited. And so all of our viewers, I think you're in for a treat. I'm going to give you a quick brief outline of tonight's discussion so that everybody knows what to expect at home. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce each of our panel members briefly, and then give an intro. Once I introduce everybody, then at home you'll know them and be able to relate to them a little better, as opposed to having them just sit here while others talk. And panel members can feel free to perhaps interject if there's something really significant in the moment. I would encourage that, but just don't interrupt me. Just kidding. Just kidding. Anyway, so I'm going to introduce everybody, and then I'll set up with a couple of things that have been happening, as you know, in the world of education, and then pass off to Frank Edelblut, who will talk and share his wisdom and his perspective. Everybody is going to share their own rich perspective. I think you're going to really like it. So let me start by introducing myself. I am not Dr. Brake, as it might show up there, but this is Dr. Brake and myself. I am Felix Alvarado. I'm the director of Straight A Academy. We are an education company. I'm an education consultant, teacher, lifelong teacher. I've been a professional educator since I graduated from the University of Michigan School of Education back in 1986. So I've been working directly with teenagers for 34 years. And I know what you guys are thinking at home. I can hear you. I hear them. I don't know if you can hear them, Dr. Brake, but I hear them in cyberspace. They're all saying, there's no way this man has been teaching for 34 years. He looks way too young. He looks way too young to have been teaching for that long. I hear you. I appreciate it. Thank you. But no, actually, 34 years of working with teenagers will do two things. They'll keep you young, and they'll turn you into a bit of a wise guy. So I blame the kids for that. But yeah, I've been teaching for a long time. I've worked as a teacher, as a director of at the time we called it a boutique school. Now the term micro school has come into fashion. And, but for me, I've always worked directly with students, and that's always been my happy place. All of the administrative type stuff, yeah, I'd much rather work with the kids. Okay, but that's me. And I'm going to introduce Frank Edelblut, the Commissioner of Education, a little bit from the heart because I've gotten to know him, and you can find his bio and get other details about him. But I want you to know that Frank is one of the smartest guys I've met in the world of education, and that wasn't where he started, but he's a certified public accountant who went into business for himself, had a great successful business, was able to sell that and become a venture cap kind of guy. I don't know, I don't want to speak too much for you, but according to his bio, you know, he has a vision to make education accessible to everyone. And it's one of the things that I love talking to Frank about over the past few years is his vision to create more options for students, because no two kids learn the same. And I've really appreciated the work he's doing as the Commissioner of Education in the state of New Hampshire. I was heartbroken the night during the gubernatorial primaries when I was with you, Frank, and I remember, what was it, like 200, 250 votes difference? Like, oh. But anyway, I think you're well placed to do great work now. And he is, you know, he's a blessing. He also had experience homeschooling as a homeschool father. And he's just one of the finest people you'll ever want to meet. I'll take my check later. No, I do say that from the heart. Let me also introduce to you, to my right, your left, I don't know, Dr. Richard Brake. Dr. Richard Brake has had a diverse career in education and public service, public policy before joining St. Michael's Academy. St. Michael, not St. Michael's, right. St. Michael Academy, including stints as legislative staffer, political science professor, a think tank executive, and an Army officer. And you can reach out to you can reach out to Dr. Brake at www.stmichaelupnorth.org if you want to connect with him. He's got his BA in History and Government from Georgetown, a master's from UVA in government, and a PhD in political science from Temple. So, man with many letters.
Yeah, signifying nothing.
Yeah. So. Well, my mom used to say that PhD stood for piled high and deep. That was my mom. That was my mom. I don't know.
I would tend to agree with that for most of them.
No offense. But no, but he's running a great school. And I wanted to also give you the shout out to, if you want to reach out to Commissioner of Education Frank Edelblut, you can do so through the New Hampshire Department of Education, and he put in the chat his email. You could reach out to him directly. Also with us is Diane Murphy. Diane is a former public school teacher for over 30 years, in the trenches with me many, many years. Well, not in the same school, but she's also the founder of Big Fish Learning Community in Dover. And Diane, I'm looking forward to hearing the difference between learning community and micro school. And I think it's fantastic, the work that you're doing, the leap that she took to go found that learning community, self-directed learners, right? And I was saying right before we started the program that I love the tagline that says, learning is natural, schooling is optional. But we all learn in different ways, and I love that. And you can reach out to her at www.bigfish, nh.org. And also very happy to have with us Sharon Harris. Sharon is an education consultant and certified life and career coach. Sharon assists students and families as they navigate and identify education and career opportunities and options. She has designed and developed a uniquely effective approach to the coaching process. You can reach out to Sharon at www.partnered-success.com. That's partnered-success.com. And Sharon brings a unique perspective as she helps kids who are trying to aspire to something, and she helps them to define that and helps them to, I'll let her tell more about that, but it's certainly a great perspective that we have here tonight from many different points of view. So with that said, and now that everybody knows, those of us on the panel, also hello, shout out to the fine outs who said hello, coming to us from Michigan. Let me first mention that, you know, the world of education is changing right before our very eyes. And I think that this means that we've arrived at a seminal moment in history. We have an opportunity to fundamentally, you know, transform the education ecosystem, which Frank will speak about in a minute. Not only to redefine what it means to educate our children, but also to reimagine how we do it. And I think, you know, how we educate our children this spring, how we educated them this spring when the shutdowns happened, you know, has not worked very well for many children. While for other children, it has worked well. And I think that just highlights the whole point that all of us here are bringing a diverse options for students for learning. And as Diane, when we talked, we mentioned something about the New York Times article that talked about how some kids at home had less stress, acne went away, they had great success, right? But I can tell you personally, one of my own students had incredible stress. He needed desperately to have that human connection. And I won't mention the student's name. He knows who he is. If he's watching us or not, I don't know. But he is a terrific kid, and he just loved being not only with other students, but with his teachers. We do a lot of Socratic dialogue, and he loved that interchange. And even though we did so in cyberspace, it was missing something for him. So the steps that the schools took, I don't want to criticize any of the schools, because we're in unprecedented times. And everyone has done the best they could. And I think it's fair to say that some schools and learning communities may have handled it better than others. Some of the so-called distance learning, online learning, remote learning, we've come up with all these different terms, and I don't think it means the same thing to any two schools or people. But to me, the one thing that matters most is real-time education, if possible. There's something about being in the moment, and obviously being in person is extra rich, but I've been working using these platforms for over 10 years now. The WebExes, the GoToMeetings, last year I was on vacation in Thailand, and I was teaching students back in New Hampshire. So I've been using this technology for a long time, but I had already a relationship with them, so that when we went into cyberspace, it became more, it was more real to us. But the idea is that, you know, kids, I think, I don't want to speak for you, Diane, but kids at Big Fish might not have skipped a beat with all of this self-directed learning. They might have been great, right? But some parents and students wanted and needed a place to go outside of the home. Others just needed better connectivity. But I think what all parents and students want and need this fall, I think the one word that would sum it up is options. What will work best for my child? What will work best for one of my children will be different than what works best for a different one, right? So we need options. And with that, I want to pass it off to Frank and ask you if you would take up the mantle and discuss what are some of the options that you see as the Commissioner of Education in the state of New Hampshire, and what is this education ecosystem, and what are some legal connections? Frank, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for my co-hosts in this conversation that we're going to have with folks. And I hope that it is enriching and encouraging for folks that are tuning in, and those folks who watch this not live, but maybe they tune into the recorded message later on. And I know these folks on these different screens in front of me, and you are in for a surprise and some delight this evening as you listen to what they share with you. So I just appreciate you allowing me to join you. Felix, are you raising your hand because you want to cut me off for a second?
Big shout out to Needham in New Jersey.
Okay, and New Jersey too. There you go. So I keep hearing Michigan and New Jersey. I'm going to talk principally about New Hampshire because I am the Commissioner of Education here in New Hampshire, and I think it's appropriate that I talk about kind of the landscape for education in New Hampshire. And I know that these other folks are going to add a lot of texture to that and color to that in ways that are really going to make it valuable to you. But I think, and I don't know if I speak exactly for everyone on this call, but I think we all have kind of an inherent belief that children are curious. They inherently want to learn. They're learning all the time with or without us. The question is, how do we nurture that curiosity and let it really bloom and grow and succeed to bring children to what I call bright futures? And I think that we also have to share, I think, this common belief that every single kid has a bright future, and that's where we want to bring them to. Those bright futures are all going to look different, and that's okay. In New Hampshire, our legal structure for education has three main tools, or really structures that we conduct education. One is public education, which is something that we're all familiar with. In New Hampshire, that takes the form of a traditional public school or a public charter school. So those are two of the options that take place in a public school setting. In the traditional public school, the school that you attend is generally assigned based upon where you live. So the neighborhood that you're in has been assigned to a public school, and that's where you're going to end up going. A charter school, on the other hand, is also a public charter school that you enroll in, and so you may live outside of the immediate proximity to that school, but you still may attend that school. And in the ecosystem, to use that term, Felix, in New Hampshire, our idea around charter schools are really not to just replicate the traditional instructional environment that you may find in a traditional public school, but to try something different, to have a different approach that either appeals to kids or has some other nuance to it that is different and tries to create different types of opportunities for students. The second type is we have private schools, and many people are aware of the various private schools that we have in New Hampshire and really around the country, and lots of those private schools come in lots of different sizes and shapes and varieties, and that is the second model. And then the third is in New Hampshire, we have an education program called Home Education Program. And so those are the threes. And if you're a student or if you're a child between the ages of 6 and 8, we have a compulsory education law that requires you to be enrolled in one of these three programs, whether that is in a public program, a private program, or in a home education program, each of those being equivalent education programs in terms of the legal status for a particular child. One of the things that I think is really important is, and sometimes is conflated, is that we conflate the legal structure, whether it's a public, private, or a home education program, with an instructional model and how that instruction takes place. And in New Hampshire, in any of these programs, you can encounter a variety of different instructional approaches or instructional models. And so I bring that up because there's been a lot of conversation as we are all experiencing the pandemic and the disruption to a lot of the things that are very familiar to us. And we are hearing things about micro schools. That's a term that you used, Felix, and I'm going to guess that Diane will probably weigh in a little bit and develop that a little bit more for us, and I think that would be great. We hear a lot about micro schools and what that is. And so I think it's important to distinguish that micro school is an instructional model that, in broad strokes, is a smaller cohort of students that generally is multi-aged and is working in maybe a unique type of an environment, in a unique learning environment. It is possible through a traditional public school, while it's not common, it is possible for that instructional model of a microschool to be deployed by a traditional public school or a charter school or a private school or a homeschool model. Again, so trying not to conflate those different types of instructional models that you see. And then what I will also just kind of spend a little bit of time talking about is I get a lot of questions lately, and I'm taking advantage here, Felix, to answer questions that I get at the office quite frequently. And that is around home education programs and what those entail. So in the state of New Hampshire, the law that governs home education programs it's a relatively easy law. It's 193A. So RSA 193A, and if you were to Google RSA 193A, you would get that law. Pretty straightforward legal structure if you decide that home education is a direction that you want to move in or go towards. And it involves a couple of things. So the first step really is a notification, right? Because if you're between 6 and 18, you have to be enrolled in one of these 3 systems that I have described to you. And so the first step, if you decide that you want to enroll in a home education program, is to file what's referred to as an intent to home educate. And that is just a notification. There are many forms out there, and it's not a complicated legal notification. You just have to let somebody know, and that somebody includes one of 3 places. You can let the superintendent of the traditional public school to which you are assigned, you can tell them, I'm going to enroll in a home education program. And so that moves you from one system to another system, or one program to another program. You can notify the Commissioner of Education. On a regular basis, I receive requests to enter into a home education program at the Department of Education. We will acknowledge those with a letter back to you, so you will know that you have been properly notified. And then the other thing is you can have what's referred to as a participating school, and that generally is a private school that says, hey, we'll take custody really of that intent to home educate. And so it can be filed there as well. But that's laid out very clearly in our law. I often say to folks, though, that the idea of home education, they're thinking like, oh, home education is easy, you just file an intent. No, that's the easy part. The hard part is you actually have to educate the kids, right? And so we do have some aspects relative to education that, we want our children to have a good education, and it enumerates in the law under Section A4. It talks about designing an educational program that includes instruction in science and math and language and government and history, health, reading, writing, spelling, the history of the Constitution of New Hampshire and the United States, and an exposure and an appreciation for music, right? So it's not just that you file the intent to home educate, but then you're actually finding ways to engage the student, your child in often cases in home education, in those various types of programming. And then the other aspect of that law, after it enumerates that long list of things that you're going to be engaging in, it says home education shall be provided by a parent for his own child. And I only bring this up because, again, an area of confusion that has, sometimes we get questions around, and they're like, well, what does that mean to provide an education? Does that mean that if I'm the parent, that I am responsible for all of the direct instruction to the child in all of these various diverse areas? And it is not. The analogy that I like to use is, as parents, I'm responsible for providing food to my children. Sometimes to tell you the truth, I don't grow all the food that my kids eat, right? Sometimes I go to the grocery store. Sometimes I take them to the restaurant and I get something to eat. Sometimes we try to avoid the fast food if we can. But I guess what I'm saying is, really, when you're talking about providing, you're assuming the responsibility to make sure in that home education program, your child is getting exposed to all of these various aspects of a home education program. And then just the last thing that I'll just mention relative to home education program, because again, a lot of questions come in, relative to accountability. And so we have a variety of accountability that can take place for our students. So annually, if a parent there's a couple of ways they can do. They can do evaluations, which may be through a certified educator that comes in and goes through an evaluation process with you to see how is the educational progress of that student advancing. It is also possible for a home education student to take an assessment, and that would be like a nationally norm referenced assessment. Some students may take a PSAT or an SAT, or they may take an Iowa Basic, or they may take a Stanford Achievement Test. There's lots of different assessments out there, but you're required to take that assessment. And really what we're interested in is just for you, and it's really information for you to assess, how is my student progressing? Are they making academic growth in the instructional program that I am working with them in? And so those are really the three programs, and a little bit more detail around what it looks like in terms of home education. But understand that across these three various programs, there's lots of instructional models, and I think some of the speakers tonight will probably describe those in more detail, but lots of instructional models that might engage a student. And to your point, Felix, kids are all different, they all engage differently, they all grow differently. And so I actually will I'm going to conclude my comments with this, is what we have to recognize is that oftentimes we build what I refer to as linear learning systems, right? That just kind of progress on this straight line from K through 12. And the difficulty is that that is contradictory to learning science. Learning science would tell you that the way that children, and really even us as adults, the way that we learn is not too different from the way we grow physiologically. And so for anybody who wants to know how that works is, I often say, come over my house, open up the closet door, and you'll see these little Sharpie marks on the inside of the closet door with dates next to them. And those represent, each year we would take the kids and you put them in the closet and you mark how tall they are. And what you'll find is in some years, those little growth marks are close together because they didn't grow that much. In other years, whoa, growth spurt. And all of a sudden, a child has this growth spurt and they mature quite a bit. And that's really how learning takes place. So while we have to be careful that if we've designed a linear learning system, but students are learning in very jagged ways, they might plateau for a little bit, then they have a growth spurt. And what we do is we wanted to have kind of an instructional model that accommodates that learner as they grow, just as they grow physiologically, and we accommodate them. And sometimes we have to buy them new pants because they're getting really short, or sometimes we get hand-me-downs and they're way too big. We need an educational system that's just right and fits the child. So again, thank you for letting me join you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may put into the chat as we move along. Thanks, Felix.
Well, thanks, Frank. I appreciate you weighing in on some of the legal aspects. I know that some people find that a little bit intimidating, but certainly, we've been working with the homeschool model with microschools. I guess I had a microschool before we called them microschools. Mm-hmm. And we found that we did not have a CEEB code for our school when we had an official school, registered with the state of New Hampshire, and no school can get a CEEB code for the first 2 years. And I found that, well, that's not going to serve my seniors right now. So kids, when they were filling out applications to go to college, I guess the only option is we have to put in the homeschool code. They put in the homeschool code, and they all got accepted to their first choice colleges with scholarships. So homeschool has really evolved over the years. Back, I think maybe in the 70s when it was really starting to become noticed as maybe it's something. In the 80s, it became a little bit more accepted. I homeschooled through the 90s. I know you did, Frank. And when I say I homeschooled, I mean my wife homeschooled. That's what I really mean. But we homeschooled, right? And through the 90s, and it has become more and more accepted. And I love the fact that more and more types of learning opportunities are being accepted. And I would include in that now leveraging technology to bring kids the best education they can get for them. And I would like to recommend that you take a look at St. Michael Academy. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Brake to speak about what they do there. But we can work with technology to offer your child an amazing classical education that, again, not going to be for everybody, but I went through the curriculum, loved it. That's why Dr. Brake is sitting with me presently. So Dr. Brake, I'd love to have you
All
take it
right.
away and talk a little bit about what you guys are doing at
Well, thank you,
St.
Felix.
Mike's.
Appreciate it. Honored to be with you all. It's a really kind of a humbling thing to be with a lot of smarter people than myself. Other than I'm just sitting really close to Felix in COVID environment, so you better have been clean or whatever, and healthy and all that. But I guess I've just met Felix a couple of weeks ago, and so I feel like you've. Are you sure you really want to work with me? I'm not sure, but I guess you checked out our website and all that.
Yeah.
So I thought what I would try to do in the short time that I've been allotted is to kind of tell you a little bit about how I came to this thing called classical education, tell you a little bit about our school, and then I think what you really were kind of intrigued by is that when COVID hit, we were forced to kind of stop doing what we were doing in kind of a traditional in-class, live format, and then what did we do to try to get through the year, and then what that means for the future. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So this is my third year as a principal of a classical school. Before that, mostly in the think tank world, taught college for about 10 years. My field's of political science, American politics. My dad was a elementary school teacher and coach, so my two brothers are teachers, aunts, uncles, so teaching is kind of in my blood. But I kind of came back around to K-12 education, kind of sideways. And a friend of mine had started a classical school, very involved with the curriculum development. He went off to get a new job. He needed someone to be on the board. And then I get a call. I was dropping my eldest kid off from college to college for his first year. And I get a call saying, "Oh my gosh, our history teacher quit. Can you help?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll teach a course," as I kind of manage my think tank. And they said, "Oh no, we need 3." So I said, "Well, I'll talk to my board." And now I'm here in Northern Michigan running a school. So I kind of felt like, God was kind of leading me in a way that, maybe I wasn't in charge, maybe he was, and he was putting out these opportunities. And finally I took it. So what is classical education? That might be something, I guess Frank was talking about legal institutions of education and formats of instruction. So I guess classical would be an instructional model, perhaps. And it's kind of the proof that what is old is now new. So there's classical Christian schools, there's classical Catholic schools, there's actually secular classical schools. So they kind of come in all different shapes and sizes. But I think some of the couple of buzzwords that I think help define it. It's a great books model. I don't know if people have heard about that. So we read the great books of Western culture. And so, I tell my kids, I'm not teaching you, Plato is. Why would I try to improve upon him, right? So we're teaching 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders, Dante, Shakespeare, Plato, the founding fathers, and we move them through. I kind of like to say that we take these kids on a journey through the 4 cities of the American experience: Rome, Athens, Jerusalem, and then I would include Philadelphia, because that's kind of the great synthesis in terms of taking those great cities of learning and then trying to put them into a practical Republican model, small r Republican.
Right.
And so so that's kind of what we do. And it's a challenging curriculum. We also use the Socratic method. That's another kind of buzzword in classical instruction. So it's discussion based. It's we're not lecturing so much as we are asking questions. Plato in the dialogue Meno said he didn't want to be called a teacher. He just wanted to ask the right questions and draw out the learning and the knowledge that the kid already has, right? We are a liberal arts school. So and that's not liberal or conservative, that's the art of being free. So we do that. We're a college prep school. So we prepare kids for college, but we're also a heaven prep school. And I would argue that heaven has a higher admission standard than Harvard. And then finally, I think that we try to harmonize faith and reason in a way that helps people of faith, and maybe people without faith, to understand that there's a coherence in the created order. Okay, and so that's what we do. We're our 7 through 12 school. We have about 50 kids. Some of them are part-time, some of them are full-time, and so we were doing our thing. And then March 13th, and it was Friday, wasn't it? It was Friday the 13th. And we get the order from the state of Michigan and Governor Whitmer that we were to shut down. And, you know, we are an independent classical Catholic school, which meant we're not a diocesan school. We basically just have an independent board. And so we were able to kind of be able to shift very quickly in terms of, you know, how we were going to deliver instruction. And I was lucky because I'm 55, I'm a Luddite. The idea that Dr. Brake would be teaching people with Zoom was about as foreign as me going to the moon, okay? But I had some very smart younger teachers who knew how to manipulate all these technologies. And so we had a kind of a platform where kids could go online, get their lectures. We started doing more live Zoom as we went along. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that happened was we became better teachers because we were forced to. I know that I've been kind of resting on my laurels for about 20 years as I'm trying to administrate and also teach. I actually had to show my stuff, and I put it online and put it in Google Docs and all these kinds of things. So I think we all became better teachers, but by the end of it, we were very haggard, and we were really tired. And some kids flourished, most kids didn't. And I think part of the thing that we came away with was, we've got all these contingency plans for this year if the COVID thing hits again. We want to stay open for live instruction, but we know that some people might, if we get a spike or sickness or something like that, there might be some people who want to do it at home. We think that the instruction that we deliver online will be better if we have kids in the classroom. We're not going to, even if we have the number of students that we need, which is about 120, I think, to make budget. We got about 50 now, so we need help. We get most of our funding from private donations. But we don't want more than 15 kids probably in a classroom because it's hard to do the Socratic stuff and the discussion model with that kind of size. But we're convinced that if we're beaming this stuff into people's homes, we want to do it live. We want to do it in front of an audience. I think our teachers, I know for me, and I think I speak for a lot of us, we do better when we're engaging human beings, instead of just looking at a screen and all of that. And so, the fact that Felix is this expert on, you've been in the trenches in terms of how to deliver this kind of, you're a godsend. The fact that he's in Harbor Springs, I didn't even know him. And so he's going to help me. I'm hoping I'm helping him a little bit. We're making this up as we go along, to be honest with you. But
it's requiring a lot of adaptation as we go, right?
Indeed. And, I guess you can teach an old dog new tricks.
You're still young. You're only 55.
But I was old when I was 18, and again, I go back, not forward. I have some deep suspicions about progress, depending on where we're going. But I'm excited about, being able to do this blended hybrid program. And then, we've got 2 kids from Alpena who can't make it here. We're going to do some Zoom instruction for them. So we're doing a lot of different ways to deliver the product, and we just got to. That's kind of part of the deal. So that's all I have to say.
Awesome. I appreciate that. There's a good segue for me to introduce or to turn it over to Diane again at this point, because Diane, one of the things that we talked about is possibly me teaching algebra to your kids. And we would definitely be leveraging technology to do that.
Sure. So I'll just give you a kind of a little story. So
as I hand it off to Diane, let me just say, I love the beautiful contrast between the program that Dr. Brake was just describing and the liberated learning style that Diane is going to talk about. Thank you, Diane.
You're welcome. And, you know, and I think sometimes we need to have these extremes in order to come to this, you know, it's not even a middle, but to just explore, you know, possibilities. And I'm a big fan of classical conversations, and Socratic Seminar was how I led most of my 8th grade classes. I think it's vital, it's important for young people, all of us, to be able to have discourse, and that's what Socratic method brings. So I spent most of my life in school as a student first, and up through college, took 1 year in between trying to find a job, and spent 30 years teaching in Maine public schools, Southern Maine, and also in the evening for 10 years doing community college, which was a blast also. Wonderful group of people. And I love learning, and I love people. I ran theater programs. I'm, you know, pretty outgoing person, pretty creative person. And I think I started in the late 80s and the early 90s, where there was sort of a sweet spot in education where, you know, we were really excited about Howard Gardner and the different intelligences. We were really excited about experiential learning, cooperative learning, hands-on learning, and really making things relevant for kids. So as a young teacher, because I like people and I like to play, really, I'm very playful. My family thinks, you know, Arrested Development probably is part of it. But when you spend your life with mostly 8th graders, that's what happens. But I love to play with kids, and all of a sudden, you know, in the last dozen or so years, and it could really even go back close to 9/11 is where I started to track it really going downhill, was that we sort of warped into this like fear mode. We started, you know, we got this great technology, and then all of a sudden the technology is all about measuring everything kids do. And I remember the first learning results meeting I went to in Maine, I got the heebie-jeebies, because it was like, this is what all kids should know and be able to do by the end of every year. And I was like, that's nuts. You know, it's not realistic. Yes, we need a framework, we need some guidelines. So anyway, I met Ken Danford and Liberated Learners 3 years ago. I was, you know, starting my 30th year, 2016, and I really had a hard time showing up for school. It was becoming divisive in itself. The kids were showing up in my classroom really apathetic and disconnected and anxiety stricken, and they all wanted to stay in my room for lunch, and they said I was the only like nice person in the building. I was like, what happened to all my colleagues? You know, they were rule following. Really became more important than actually enjoying learning with kids. So it's not a horrible place where I worked. It's just, it's the nature of any beast. I think all our systems, we are in a place now where, you know, we're in a global pandemic, and I think it's time for us to take a look at all of our systems. And the school system, and this is where, you know, Frank's in an awkward place homeschooling his kids and being the leader of public schools, but we also love schools. We love our schools. And so I left to start a self-directed learning center called Big Fish. We're in Dover. We service 30 to 40 families. We're just starting our 3rd full year. We opened in January of 2018, so only 2.5 years. And we've had great success. Kids show up, and we help them with their parents lead through their interests. And, you know, it's sort of like the article in the New York Times last week that said why some young students are better at home. It's just that being indoors all day, being talked at, is probably not good for anybody. And so we have to look at that. And in our movement, Liberated Learners, the Alliance for Self-Directed Education, I love these people. They speak our language, which is, we really want to flip the paradigm. I mean, our guru is Ken Robinson. If you haven't seen Do Schools Kill Creativity, it's the #1 TED Talk ever shown, is the idea that it's time to flip. We, and Frank and I dream about this, and the school districts think that we're, you know, often they're, and burn them down. We're just trying to say, flip it, which means we have a multi-billion-dollar industry. Why not ask, what do you need? What if a student was able to show up at a high school or a middle school or even an elementary school and say, well, you know what, my kid needs to be outdoors at least half the day. My kid needs hands-on. You know, my son or daughter is struggling. You know, needs an introvert. The introverts really suffer in our public schools. Mm-hmm. So at Big Fish, kids can come and they design their program. We offer a lot of classes. Our classes are very introductory kinds of classes. And then when kids want to go deeper, we find them mentors. Mm-hmm. And we find people like Sharon, who is on our board and who is an incredible advocate for helping kids you know, do the things they love and find the pathway. Sharon will tell you about what she does, but she's visited almost 800 colleges across the country and really knows how the mindset works. And yes, if you do the alternative application for college now, we have 4 of our kids going on to college, our first group, and they've gotten into some fabulous places. Like our one young woman, she had health issues. I had her as a 7th grader, actually. She came at the end of her sophomore year and she said, high school's killing me. She's type A, had to get straight A's. She had autoimmune issues. And she said, I want to come out and design my own program. And it was all about music. She's a singer, she plays some instruments. So we helped her design a program where everything she was learning was connected to music. And then she took community college classes to fulfill requirements in science and in math. And we had her studying with this wonderful Eric from the Soggy Po Boys. He's a professional local musician doing theory. And anyway, she's going to Berklee School of Music and she starts in a couple of weeks. So yeah, I mean, this is one of numerous. We have another young man who is going to be at Pratt Institute and he's just turning 17. He finished a year early because he could. He went through VLAX with our support. He went through VLAX and they're a wonderful program as well. We partner really well with them because we're letting the kids lead. That's the primary piece. And I think, you know, as we look at what schools are doing or aren't doing for our communities, the bottom line is these kids want connection. They want relevance, and they're really, really tired of doing things that don't mean anything for them. And I think if we start building those conversations, last night in our parent Zoom meeting, we talked a lot about partnership parenting. Because, you know, if the schools are authoritative, which they are, it's carrot stick, you're competing for grades, you know, you're punished. You know, this is how we run our schools. Like, that's just the model. It doesn't have to be that. It's been the model that's in place. You have to get this many credits. It's very hard for parents then to be partners. But if schools can learn to be partners, and I think that's what we're trying to do at Big Fish, we're trying to hold the model of being partners with families. What do you need? You know, and families might say, you know, we really need our kid to be literate. We want our kid to get to calculus because that's really important in our family. Or we want our kid to, you know, to do the classics. So then we help them do that, but it has to be with the student's consent. And so consent is a big part of it. You know, we talk about consent in our culture all the time. Let's talk about it with schools. So, I mean, this is where we're about youth freedom and empowerment. And you'll be surprised if you know, hang around with some teenagers or even some little kids. I have step grandbabies whose other grandparents are news writers, and their other grandmother said to me, they're learning so much. They're sponges. They're you know, reading all the articles that their grandparents are writing, and you know, there's just and the idea that there's no educational emergency right now. We're having a pandemic. Yes, there's an emergency for people who need childcare. There's an emergency for kids who need technology. And I think our schools are doing that. I mean, Dover is just, I can't say enough good things about Dover. They are reaching out on every level to make it work for kids. But still, there needs to be choice. So that's where the Self-Directed Learning Center comes in, is that we don't want to make the curriculum. So that's sort of the opposite of classical conversations, but you could choose that. If you're a really academic kid, and some of our kids, we had one kid, he spent 2 months on the epic Gilgamesh with one of his mentors.
Yeah.
How fun. But thank you.
Two things I'd like to piggyback on what you were saying, Diane. Number one, the VLAX program, which is an online school. It's a free school in the state of New Hampshire. Sorry?
No, it's okay. It's the Virtual Learning Academy Charter.
Virtual Learning Academy Charter School.
Yes.
And the state of Michigan has a similar one. I'm pretty sure pretty much every state has a similar online experience, optional, free through their state. I do want to give shout out to New Hampshire as being one of the first ones to do it a long time ago. But yeah, that is available to help kids who want to pursue their interests. Yes. And then I also want to talk about the whole idea of an individual education plan, the IEP, right? I've said for decades, why doesn't every student have an IEP? Why?
They will. They will. It's coming.
right? And so
It's coming.
talking about choices, I just want kids to be able to pursue what they're passionate about. And I forget who I was saying this to. I might have been saying it to Frank, but I think we do some things wrong. And I run a tutoring center to help kids, right? And I find I keep getting a lot of students who, the parents are like, okay, my student is weak in Spanish. We got to get those Spanish grades up. I'm like, okay, we'll tutor your kid in Spanish, but what's your kid great at? Why don't we tutor them in that? Why don't we make them amazing at that, right? And we put so much time, resources, and energy into what they're not strong at.
Well, it's the offering rather than the directing. So that's the switch. When you do the directed learning, I mean, we have these beautiful buildings, public school buildings. They could become learning centers that not just kids ages 6 through 18 access, but it could be learning, centers that all age people. I mean, Dover has these, auto bays and industrial kitchen and all of these things that are really underused because it's a lot to manage. And also the multi-generational piece. And we're a little bit tricky with COVID. A lot of our volunteers and mentors are senior citizens. And so we've taught many of our friends in their 70s to use Zoom, which is great, but they miss the in-person. So we're hoping, we can get back to normalcy with that. But just the idea of, you don't have to be good at everything. I always, when people rant about how kids aren't doing well in school, and I think we'll go to a party of adults and start quizzing them on American history. It's not going to turn out so pretty either. But we can.
The math teacher.
Right. And we all have our strengths. Like I have a business manager because spreadsheets make my eyes go cross-eyed. I'm not a numbers person. I see poetry and everything. My husband sees numbers and everything, thank God. But everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. So if you let kids lead with their strengths, and then the other piece is, we kind of think of it as a buffet. Like we have American Sign Language and cooking class and, mythology and all of these different things that they actually ask for. They petition to have, we want a class in this. And then it's relevant, they want it, and learning is happening all the time. And these kids will be able to show you on the Stanfords, the SATs, and Sharon, we're going to get close on time. I'd love
to show
you to piggyback on that because, so Sharon and I met at a Chamber of Commerce meeting. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce is one of the greatest inventions of all time anyway. It's always great people come together, but we were like way on the opposite side of the conference table and we talked about our missions going around and it was like, ding! It was like, okay, we have the same mission. So Sharon.
So it's a good segue to hand it over to Sharon about helping kids find what they're passionate about and designing a program that Diane said, for them, that they can fulfill at their own pace as well. I think that's hugely important. So Sharon,
that's actually what I do. That is my passion. I started doing that back in about 2006. So in New Hampshire, we have something called ELO coordinators. So experiential learning opportunities where students have the opportunity to fulfill their passion. So people working with students to identify what their interests are and actually go out, earn credits to do that. So I actually work independently with students to do that. So that's actually when Diane and I's antennas went up, because what I am doing on their board, but I also do independently, but I'm doing with their students, is I sit down with students and talk about where are your interests? How are your interests intersection with their learning? And then how can you take what you're interested in and tie it to what you're learning and build your educational opportunities off of that? And so, for example, I've had students that may not have excelled in math, but were interested in design, so clothing design. We were talking about how do you take your math and apply it. So we went to a store. She was interested in a local store in Portsmouth. That was her regular store where she bought, and we approached the owner about her designing a window for the Christmas season. The store owner let her design the window. She had to buy all the material. She had to put the prices together for it. We went back to the public school in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, approached 3 teachers to say, she's going to be able to do this. It's going to comprise, she's got to write, she's got to put together a math, strategy, build a whole, she's got to put together an entire portfolio based on what she's got to do. And she designed this. It took her 2 months to put it together. She ordered all of the material, clothing, designed the window, took the photos. The project ended up doing 2 months. The owner came back to her and said, could you do 2 more projects for me? It turned into a job for her. She ended up going to college for, she actually currently works for TJ Maxx and Company. But she started doing this as a sophomore in high school. All of a sudden, you've got a student who was able to take something. She was a student who was an average C student. She turned into a student that was a high B student because she found her passion and was able to apply it. Right. And I think that in our school systems, that IEP, that individual educational plan, we can do that if we have the opportunity. And I think that teachers really want to do that. It's just finding the opportunities to do that for students. And there are school systems, there are teachers who are doing that. And I've seen this. It's just, how do you do it for the number of students within a school system?
That's key.
And so at Big Fish, I'm on their board. I see it with the staff there. I get so excited to see these students find their passion and just start building on it. And when I'm working there, it's what are colleges looking for? What are businesses looking for? They're looking for those people that are critical thinkers. And when students find that passion, that is what they do. It's the critical thinking. It starts clicking and it materializes. And when they find it, it doesn't just happen in the classroom. It becomes that passion turns into a hobby, which turns into a job, which turns into, you got.
If I may interject, Sharon, I think there's a key piece that you're touching on, and that is, one of the common threads here between Dr. Brake's experience at St. Michael's and Diane's with her learning community and the micro schools I've worked with is small numbers. Mm-hmm. And I think the mentorship part, the mentorship piece is missing when I, as a teacher, have 20 students in front of me. I can't mentor 20 kids at once.
Well, that, if I can chime in, is part of the structural change that I think we're looking at. And some of the teachers that I had the most trouble with at the end of my career were a byproduct of the teacher training that's happening right now that's rooted in the standards movement. And I remember having this wonderful conversation, with a group of teachers about changing the immigration project we were doing with 8th graders and trying to make it a little bit more modern. We've studied European 1910 immigration for decades. More people have moved around the planet in the last 10 years than historically ever. And, the younger teachers, because of their training, were like, well, what standard would we be covering? What would be the assessment piece? And I'm thinking, we've ruined it. As soon as you start focusing on being so results oriented in the sense that it doesn't match a kid's interests, you have shut down the learning. So one of the things I brought it up to, and I think it might have been the Great Bay, some great people from Great Bay Community College, when we were talking about teacher preparation, is what if we had a mentor training? It could probably be an associate's kind of credit, a 2-year, let's train mentors. And so we are shifting from that, what do they call it? The sage on the stage, right? We're shifting. No, kids can find a YouTube video this far of us on any topic. They'll tell you, whether it's on Zoom or in person, but they do want engagement. They want to be challenged, and they want relevance more than anything. And we've hidden these things. I used to get in trouble for talking about current events in English class. Right. It's not in the curriculum. Well, I don't know. It's important to know what's happening in the world. So I think that's where schools have, unfortunately, my husband is a math guy, and we were talking about this last night, nothing in life is linear. And he said that was his favorite lesson in about linear equations, because it's no, it doesn't work that way. Nothing in life is linear. And this is where you said it earlier, Felix, about, we're figuring it out as we go. That is exactly what all of us are doing all of the time. and we give this illusion to our kids. And Mike's sons, who call me out on everything, they're 25 and 30. But when my son graduated UNH and started working, he goes, "Oh my God, the biggest thing I realize is that everybody's faking it till they make it." So, you know, so that's the, I'm excited about where we're at, because we have conversations with people like Frank and you guys who, you know, we can see it. It's just now how we want to partner. You can't fix the problem from within the system. If they don't play with you, they won't play with us because we're not an accredited school.
Right.
You know, so one of our clients was offered a placement for $60,000 at a private school. And yet the school district won't pay $9,000 for this student to come and thrive with us because we're not an accredited school. So these are the kinds of partnerships.
If I can just interject, Dr. Brake, piggyback on that, you were going to say.
Well, you know, Diane, you've said so many things. I mean, I get the feeling that, you know, you've got a different way of kind of delivering the product, and maybe you have a different approach and all that. But you know, not only small is beautiful, right? There's that size component. But you know, what is the purpose in the first place? I get the sense that a lot of these more traditional, you know, kind of conventional schools, you know, I don't think they step back and say, why are we teaching this stuff in the first place? And for us, it's the joy of learning. It's truth for its own sake. And the idea that, look, you know, youth is wasted on the young. So is education to some degree, right? This is a lifelong process. We just want them to get an idea of how to think and just fall in love with learning, whatever they, and so
The joy of learning.
and so if you got that, and if you got those critical thinking skills, then, you know, this is just the beginning for them. It's not the end. It's just the beginning. And
can I just weigh in on that one thing? So it's not that we want to give them the joy of learning. They already have the joy of learning and the joy of curiosity. What we have to be careful is to not beat it out of them.
Exactly.
Shut it down, right? They've got that. We just got to let it go and nurture it.
So we have this student that we had that came to Big Fish. He came from a public high school, was told that you have to do it this way. You've got to learn this way, because he was passionate about history.
Yeah.
And he wanted more. You've got to do it this way. And you've got to take this course before you can take this course. And he chose to come to Big Fish. And we said, okay, you're taking courses at VLAC, you're taking courses at Big Fish, but if you really want to do this course, continue your course at Big Fish, but you can also dive into taking courses at the community college.
Sure.
So he took courses at VLAC, Big Fish, and the community college, was able to graduate at 17.
Yeah.
And no one had told him that VLAC, community college were even options.
Well, Sharon, I can tell you, I mean, at our school, you know, we can't offer a lot of, you know, so we partner with the community college. And so we have a dual enrollment program. If they're enrolled in our school, they get to go there for free. And if we're not offering something, we encourage them to do it. Now, you know, we got some things that we want to obviously impart upon them, but we're also, we have enough humility to know that we can't do everything. So.
See you, Neelam. So we are past the 8 o'clock hour. I would like to know if there's anyone there who would like to ask any questions to the panel. I promised a question and answer session. I want to beg my panel's patience, if you would be able to hang out with us for a little bit longer. I don't know if there's any.
The questions are always better than the presentations.
So I know a lot of times people are a little timid to ask questions, but you can ask a question in the chat. I also have a question and answer page that's open that you could use. I left them both open, but I don't know if anyone wants to ask a question, or if you're too timid. I really want to thank the panel for being here. My hope was to, to get through a certain amount of material, but I'm just now getting regenerated and rejuvenated, because this happens all the time to me. I'm glad no one was here. I'm glad you didn't get here like 5 minutes sooner, because I was sitting here like this. I've been having long weeks, long days. And then when you got here, we started talking, and I just got energized, and I'm really psyched, because I love helping, like Frank said, bring out the joy in the kids, the joy of learning.
Felix, you used the word reimagine when you first opened up the talk, and that's one of our taglines is reimagine education with us. because some students really enjoy the school setting. You know, I have my two sons, one of them really thrived in school. He was really good reader, writer, mathematician, yeah, that kind of a mind, loved the social aspect of it. The other one is a maker. But, you know, it's not about, you talked about small as being important. And so I think the scalable part of it is how do we help schools show up for kids? And so we show it by, you know, being the model to a certain degree, because a lot of kids do well in school and love the structure of it, but it is about, maybe you don't need to have 5 or 6 subjects going all the time. Maybe you're only focused on 1 or 2.
We have a couple of questions coming in, and I would love to say, you know, well, I'm just going to get to the questions real quickly. Stephen asks, how have you gained and nurtured parent support in your schools? As a sub, I'm often found great antagonisms between parents and schools.
Well, I saw the question first, so I guess I got to stab at it.
So
I mean, and I think Frank mentioned this too. You know, you have these different institutional legal, you know, the homeschool models. Well, a lot of these classical schools start off as homeschool cooperatives, and then they kind of they either run out of gas, or maybe there's some things that the parents can't teach. But not only is it part of the catechism of the church that parents are the primary educators of their children, we couldn't do it without parents. So we have several parents that are teachers themselves, and maybe they come in and substitute. So I mean, not only is small, but if you're small, you need help. So it's not even a question of whether there's antagonism or not. Like, we need the help, and then they have buy-in, and so it's really beautiful how it turns out. So there's no antagonism at all. Not only that, I love my parents because they help me deliver my mission.
Well, I think Steve, that ends up being a specific school culture that's been developed. And I hate to say it, I don't want to, because I know where you sub, and I don't want to denigrate any school, but I think that's really, what does the leadership nurture in their school?
That's a luxury of being private too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, in public schools, you deal with everybody.
Yeah,
So,
I'm
going to interrupt just to say,
Right,
again, just to let Frank go,
Sure.
because it's now 8:05. We've kept him a little extra.
Hey, Frank.
We're going to see you again on Tuesday. So if you didn't get any questions answered here tonight, please come back. We're going to be, this is going to recur next Tuesday at 7 p.m. as well. And I'm looking forward to that as well. We can hopefully develop this a little bit more, because I feel like we've started a conversation here that needs further discussion.
Thank you all so much. I need to be on an 8 o'clock call, so I'm going to jump off there.
God bless you, friends. Thank you so much for being here. And to the other panelists, Dr. Brake, thank you for swimming across the little Traverse Bay from
Thanks for having
Petoskey
us.
to get here to Harbor Springs. And Diane and Sharon, I'm really delighted to have met you. I love the mentorship you're doing with kids. And it's exciting. It's what really makes me, you know, get fired up as a teacher. Thank you, Yesenia, for your comment about getting excited, getting back to school.
Yeah.
We'll, if there are any other questions that come in, or you want to ask other questions, you can reach me at educationoptions@straighta.com. educationoptions@straighta.com. I will, and if you forget any of this information, I will be happy to put you in touch with these fine people who are here.
Right.
And love it.
Throw mine in there. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to put that in, I just want to, say, let's keep this rolling, and let's show parents that they do have these options that exist, that it's not one size fits all. And they've got,
And parents know their kids. That's the piece. We need to help parents. They know their kids.
Right.
So they need to be part of it. And that's the other piece where public schools in the factory model, unfortunately, have, you know, disenfranchised the parents. And we, you know, it's tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah, there's a lot of resources out there, and we don't realize, you know, right now you've got a lot of students looking at going back into the school system, and they're concerned about being online. They're concerned about, you know, in states like, you know, New Hampshire, when you've got the option to be online, whether it be through the public school, whether it be through the community college in the state of New Hampshire, you can do it at the community college just as easily as you can, we've got VLAC, or do you take a college credit?
Right.
When I was a senior at Harbor Springs High School, it was the same thing. They didn't offer calculus, so I had to go to the community college. I had one class my senior year at the high school.
Huh.
I took college level English, college level chemistry, and college level calculus in my senior year, so that was more out of a necessity, but I think it should be more of a.
We should be working to plan it out for students and families.
If they had their individual education plan, yes.
Yeah.
You got it. You
Let
got
them move along. Let them, there's no reason to trap them for 12 years. Some of them are ready to move along.
Yeah.
I have a kid that one of my last students in public school was this brilliant small engines repair kid, 14 years old, and he was stock car racing and rigging engines and making money on the weekends, and he could fix anything. I brought all our lawnmowers to him and everything, and he ended up, I knew he would drop out, and I offered him, because he went to high school and could not do all of the classes, but he will have a business and make more money than most of us because he knows engines, and let him know engines. And I said, come to Big Fish, we'll help you set up your budget, your bank accounts, that kind of thing, get the support you need. But for him to hang out in high school till he's 18, this is the pipeline that takes kids to prison. You make them bad enough because they're not achieving, and they end up feeling that they are bad. And so that's a whole other piece that we have to look at as a culture as we reimagine education. So I'm excited to talk to you guys again on Tuesday night, and I hope, Sharon, you'll be able to join us. You might be traveling, but
I think I get in at 5:30, so we'll see. I should make it back in time.
And we'll take this as an introduction, so next time we can get into some more meat right away. And I just see how we can leverage technology and leverage networking.
Yes, absolutely.
absolutely.
And I will be delighted to be able to stay connected with your learning community, Diane. I'd be happy to do the algebra piece. We can talk about that.
Definitely.
And we'll continue. Again, thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you. Good night.
Yep. Good night.
Thank you, ladies.
Cheers.
Yep. Take care.
You know.